have you ever told yourself, I'll start in 5 minutes, but 5 minutes turn into an hour turns into tomorrow, and somehow the work never gets done? Most people think that's laziness, that they need more discipline, more motivation. But what if none of that is true? What if the real problem happens before you even begin? Because every time you face a difficult task, your brain makes a prediction, not, will this help my future? Not, is this important? It asks, how uncomfortable will the next few minutes feel? And here's the catch. Your brain doesn't know, it guesses. Sometimes it guesses completely wrong. Think about the last time you had to study. Before you opened the book, it felt exhausting. The pages looked endless. Starting felt harder than the work itself. But once you began, something changed. 20 minutes later, you were still studying. You had found your rhythm. The assignment hadn't changed. You had, or more accurately, your brain had. That's why procrastination usually isn't a motivation problem. It's a prediction problem. Your brain assumes the beginning represents the whole journey most of the time. It doesn't, and that's exactly why the 1-0 minute rule works. Here's what the 1-0 minute rule says. Don't promise yourself to finish the assignment. Don't promise yourself to study for 2 hours. Don't even promise to make real progress. Promise yourself just 10 minutes. That's it. Set a timer, open the book, read, write, solve one problem, keep going until the timer ends. Then you have permission to stop. Seriously. If 10 minutes are over and you still don't want to continue, walk away, no guilt, no pressure at first. That sounds too simple. How could 10 minutes possibly change anything? Because the goal was never to finish the task. The goal is to get past the beginning. Remember the question your brain asks? How uncomfortable will this be? The only way to answer that question accurately is to start not tomorrow, not later. Now, and something interesting happens. Once those first few minutes are behind you, the task suddenly feels smaller, not because it changed, but because your guess met reality. Psychologists have a name for this shift. Action changes emotion. Most people believe they need motivation before they can act, but in many cases, the opposite is true. Action comes first, motivation follows. Here's the surprising part. The people who procrastinate the most often aren't lazy. They care. They care so much about doing things well that their brain treats every mistake like a threat. Perfection quietly becomes procrastination. The longer they wait, the heavier the task becomes. Not in reality, only in their imagination. The first few minutes break the invisible wall. That looked impossible from the outside. Once you're moving, stopping often feels harder than continuing. That's why so many people discover they've studied for 30 minutes after promising themselves only 10. The timer didn't force them to work. It simply helped them get out of their own way. But here's something important. The 1-0 minute rule doesn't always work, at least not the way most people use it. Many people treat it like another productivity trick. They set a timer, stare at the page, wait to feel motivated, and after 10 minutes, nothing happens. So they assume the rule doesn't work, but that was never the point. The rule isn't about waiting for motivation. It's about reducing resistance, because resistance lives at the beginning, before you open the document, before you write the first sentence, before you solve the first question. That's where your brain tries to protect you. It whispers, this will take forever. This is going to be difficult. You can do it later. And if you listen, you'll probably believe it. Not because it's true, but because you've never tested it. The moment you begin, something changes. The task stops being an idea. It becomes a real experience, and real experiences are almost always less frightening than the stories we invent in our heads. Think about pushing a heavy car. The hardest part is getting it moving. Once the wheels begin to roll, you still need effort, but not the same effort it took to overcome that first moment. Your brain works in a surprisingly similar way. Starting costs more energy than continuing. That's why the first 10 minutes can completely change the next hour, not because they make you productive, but because they help your brain realize the task was never as painful as it predicted. So how do you actually use this tomorrow? Keep it simple. Step 1, choose one task, not 3, not your entire to-do list, just one. Step 2, make the starting point almost impossible to fail. Don't write. Finish the report, write. Open the document, don't write. Study biology, write. Read one page. Don't tell yourself, I'm going to clean the house. Tell yourself, I'm going to wash one plate. The smaller the first step, the less your brain resists. Step 3, set a timer for 10 minutes and make one promise. For the next 10 minutes, you won't judge your progress. You won't think about how much is left. You won't ask yourself whether you feel motivated. You'll simply keep moving. Then when the timer rings, ask yourself one question. Do I really want to stop most of the time? The answer will surprise you. Because once you're focused, stopping feels unnecessary. You've already crossed the hardest part. And if you do stop, that's okay too. You still won, because every time you start, you teach your brain a new lesson. This task isn't as painful as I expected. The next time you face it, the resistance becomes a little weaker, then weaker again, until one day, starting no longer feels like a battle. It feels normal. That's how real habits are built, not through willpower, but through repeated proof that your brain's first prediction isn't always right. There's one last thing. The 1-0 minute rule won't change your life because of 10 minutes. It changes your life because of what those 10 minutes become. One study session turns into a habit. One workout turns into a healthier body. One page turns into a finished book. One small action repeated over and over becomes a different future. That's the part most people never see. They think successful people have more discipline, more motivation, more willpower, but often they simply start even when they don't feel ready, even when their brain says, do it later, because they've learnt a simple truth. Motivation comes and goes. Action leaves evidence. Every time you begin, you teach your brain that the next beginning isn't something to fear. So the next time you hear yourself say, I'll start in 5 minutes, don't think about finishing. Don't think about tomorrow. Just give yourself 10 minutes, because sometimes the smallest decision to begin is the one that changes everything.